It was a 20-year war that killed thousands of people, but now it's over. Ethiopia and Eritrea end their hostilities, but will the peace last? I'm Imran Garda, and today's newsmaker is the Ethiopian-Eritrean conflict. Many people were dismissive when Abiy Ahmed gave his inaugural address and promised to make peace with his neighbors. But just a few months later, there was Ethiopia's Prime Minister warmly embracing his Eritrean counterpart, as if they were long-lost friends. The thaw in relations has had an immediate effect. Families who have not spoken to each other in decades will soon be reunited, as phone lines are restored, flights resumed, and borders reopened. But as the two countries' leaders dance in front of the cameras in a show of unity, observers warn there are plenty of hurdles for them to stumble over. For instance, border towns will have to decide which country they'll join. So while the peace deal has ended the war, does a powder keg still remain? And what will peace mean for Eritrea, which for so long has used the war to justify its policies? Natalie Perhonen takes a look.
For 20 years, Ethiopia and Eritrea have been at war. Now their leaders are keen to display their friendship. Bitter rivals, no more. The border dispute over the town of Badme began in 1998. Thousands died in the fight for that piece of land, and hundreds of thousands of people were displaced. The conflict ended in 2000, but it left the nations in a perpetual state of animosity. Now they have issued a formal declaration of peace. It's been made just months after Abiy Ahmed became Ethiopia's Prime Minister. He pledged to restore ties with Eritrea when he took office. And he is doing it. Change on the surface, at least, is happening quickly. Flights between the capitals will start again next week. Phone lines have been restored. Embassies will be opened in Addis Ababa and Asmara. And there's an agreement to allow Ethiopia to use Eritrean ports.
If there is peace between Ethiopian and Eritrean people, the Horn of Africa region will be a region of peace and development. Our people, who live scattered as refugees in humiliation, will come back with dignity. Our citizens will not be sold and exchanged like commodities.
We're together in the future journey. We will confront challenges and opportunities together and win together. Above all, congratulations to the people of Ethiopia and to the people of Eritrea.
It's a pact to cooperate which once seemed unthinkable, but could now transform life in both nations. The border dispute may be coming to an end, but it has left an indelible mark on Eritrea. President Isaias Afwerki has ruled the country with an iron fist. The constitution, which was ratified in 1997, has never been implemented. Afwerki has used the conflict to justify his authoritarian rule and maintain a huge army. To fill its ranks, there's compulsory military conscription. In 2016, a UN Commission of Inquiry said Eritrea's government was guilty of committing crimes against humanity.
The issues relating to Eritrea's military/national service programs include their arbitrary and indefinite duration, the use of conscripts as forced labour, including manual labour, the inhumane conditions of service, rape and torture often associated with service.
Eritrea has denied the allegations. The prospect of peace has brought a sense of optimism, but for some Eritreans, now is the moment to push for further change.
But now, the war is finally over, and the Eritrean government has no more excuse for its oppressive rule. I call upon Eritreans all around the world to put pressure on the Eritrean government, to remind them of the promise they made to give up the repressive rule once the conflict is over.
So will Eritrea now join its brother nation Ethiopia and open up to reform? Natalie Perhonen, The Newsmakers.
Let's go to our panel now. From Stockholm, we have the first secretary of the Eritrean embassy in Sweden, Sirak Balbi. In the Dutch city of Leiden, Daniel McConnell, the executive director of the Eritrean Law Society. And in Cambridge, African politics analyst Goitom Gebreluel. I thank you all for joining us, gentlemen. Goitom, let me start with you. Tens of thousands dead, decades of war. Now there's peace, there's a handshake, there's goodwill. Is it all over?
That's the big question. The rapprochement came very sudden, and the public has not been given any information on the substance of the negotiations, what the outstanding issues were, whether they've been solved or anything. We just, you know, there were some symbolic gestures, declaration from Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed that he would accept the demarcation of the border. It was accepted by Isaias Afwerki. And then now everyone is acting as if we haven't been in a state of rivalry for 17 years. It's very positive that these measures have been taken and that we are where we are, but it would be more reassuring if we could get some substantive you know, information as to how this relationship has reached where it is now, right, of the last you know, a week or so.
Okay,
and,
okay, hold that for a second. Okay, we're going to come back to you. Sirak Balbi, are you happy?
I'm very, very happy. This peace has been attained after a lot of sacrifices have been made. A lot of people have paid their lives, their opportunities. A lot of things has happened over the last 20 years. So when you see the two leaders signing a peace declaration ending 20 years of misery, I am very, very happy for the people who have suffered. And peace is probably the most important ingredient for anybody or any nation to stabilize their people and to develop their nations. So I'm very happy today. Right. It's a joyous moment. I think the Eritrean people are very happy, as we saw and witnessed on the Sunday when the Prime Minister Abiy has arrived in Asmara.
Right. So, Sirak, would you accept then, because you've said there have been a lot of sacrifices, a lot of people have given their lives, it's been a terrible state of conflict, would you accept that a lot of the sacrifices now, in order to make peace, have to come from Eritrea? Because the very nature of the country, it being very much a martial state, Human Rights Watch calls it a one-man dictatorship, the human rights record is not good. Do you accept that your country has to make a lot of the sacrifices now moving forward in order to ensure that peace is sustainable?
No, it's not quite a true information that you are giving out. I know the media and other institutions are very quick to paint Eritrea as you've described it, but the very thing that we're witnessing at the moment, you see that Eritrea has been working for peace,
absolutely, sir,
for defending
and this
itself,
is great, and this is what, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, and I know there's a slight delay, so I know the interruption is annoying because there's a slight delay. But let me put it to you this way: you're saying media is trying to, you know, give false information. I'm not quoting the media here, respectfully. I'm quoting Human Rights Watch, and I'm quoting the UN Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights. So, granted, moving forward, yes, this is possibly fantastic. Human Rights Watch in their 2018 report says Isaias Afwerki is a one-man dictatorship. The UN Commission of Inquiry in 2016 says Eritrea is committing crimes against humanity with up to 400,000 people enslaved. They use the words, not mine. They're not the media, they're UN Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights. So again, this is wonderful that there's a handshake. It's wonderful that Badme has been possibly resolved. But I ask you, don't you have to now make the sacrifices as Eritrea in order to open up now that you have possible peace with Ethiopia?
Well, yeah, that's what I was trying to answer. I think even though the Commission of Inquiry of the United Nations was found to be baseless accusations, it's clearly, I mean, the Commission of Inquiry, first of all, it was formed on a politically motivated situation, and all the reports are incredibly, basically false. I really don't want to go back to that because we can talk a lot about it. Eritrea, at this moment, the Prime Minister Abiy, Prime Minister of Ethiopia, actually said in his speech that he has got a lot to learn from President Isaias Afwerki. So just that statement actually proves that a lot, that the way they have been depicting the media, the United Nations, I mean, I give you an example. Sanctions are being put on Eritrea twice, supported by the United States. But the very day the peace declaration was signed on Monday, the very afternoon, Prime Minister Abiy went to the Secretary General of United Nations and he told them to lift the sanctions against Eritrea.
Okay,
so,
fair enough. Okay, so Sirak, let me bring in Daniel McConnell.
Categorically reject. Yeah.
Fair enough. So you reject the accusations, the human rights accusations, because a lot of the discussion here is about what will Eritrea do? Will it bend in order to make peace happen? You're saying it's not even happening, the human rights abuses. Daniel McConnell. So we've looked at the cautious optimism of Goitom saying, okay, this is good news, but let's wait and see. And we've got a lot of optimism from Sirak, but he's saying that Eritrea doesn't necessarily have to get its house in order. How do you feel about that?
Thank you for having me, Imran. It's good to have or to witness the kind of gesture that's coming from both governments in Ethiopia and in Eritrea by way of resolving what has been described as a no peace, no war situation of the last 16 to 17 years. This is good, but one needs to ask a question, a very important question, that is it possible to have peace with your neighbors when you don't have peace at home, peace with your own people? And I heard Sirak Bahalabi talking about the report of the Commission of Inquiry, discrediting the report and sometimes even confusing that report with the other sanctions against Eritrea. And there are two different processes to start with. And to say that there are no human rights violations in Eritrea happening now for the last many years is actually an insult to the victims of human rights violations. So we need to be clear. It's good to see the two governments coming together, trying to resolve their problems in a civilized way, something that should have been done actually 20 years ago. It's another thing to argue and request and demand the Eritrean government to do its own homework at home.
Right.
We are speaking about a country. We need to remember this. A country which does not have a working constitution, a country which does not have a functioning parliament.
Okay. So let me. Okay. So Daniel, because in the interest of time, certainly, and points well made. I'm going to come back to you, Goitom, in a moment, but I want to get Sirak to respond to this. Sirak, you want to respond to Daniel?
Yeah, Daniel McConnell is one of the people who was working with the former Ethiopian government to draft the Commission of Inquiry report. I saw him myself. He was working with the Ethiopian ambassador in the United Nations to actually pass this paper to make life difficult in Eritrea. So he's a very biased. He cannot actually talk about these kind of things. Eritrea did what it did to defend itself, and now we can see it with our own eyes that we have been exonerated. We had to defend our country against a brutal regime, against a regime that had the support of the United States. So some of the civil liberties were being curtailed. Once peace has been achieved, of course, we need to look at our nation, we need to build our nation, but peace and stability is one of the most important ingredients, and we have been working for this moment
so let me go
for
to
a lot of time.
Let me go to Goitom. Goitom Gebreluel. So we're hearing from the Eritrean embassy in Sweden, essentially that, given that the Ethiopians have held out the olive branch, this is a good opportunity for peace. The problem in the past was the brutality of the Ethiopians. What does that tell you about the prospects for peace and a sustainable peace?
I'm a bit worried, to be honest, because the current dynamics are uncannily similar to what went on in 1991 when the last communist regime in Ethiopia was overthrown. At that point, there was a lot of, hysteria. We had two charismatic leaders. They were being branded as the new generation of African leaders. There was talk about Eritrea and Ethiopia being one people with two governments, and the two governments, eagerly went on to integrate their economies. There were free movement of people, free movement of goods. And we had the worst, the most deadly war, interstate war in African history in a context of extensive economic interdependence and social integration. And I think one of the enabling factors was that the relationship had not been institutionalized. It was, it was based on a lot of sentiments. It was run by two charismatic leaders. And so we need to have that history in mind and draw some lessons from that. And so I think it's important that moving on, first of all, we shouldn't, one of the similarities to the past is that everyone blamed the Derg for, or that is the Ethiopian communist regime, for all the conflict in the past. So they thought that once the Derg was away, peace would naturally occur.
Right.
Now there's a similar type of rhetoric where the last government in Ethiopia, or it's a similar part, the same party, but the last leadership is blamed for everything. And now that that's out of the way,
let me ask
peace will naturally occur.
Because you are cautiously optimistic, right? You're saying there's a lot of symbolism, but not a lot of detail. But when we look at some of the details, when we look at the fact that now, Ethiopian Airlines will be flying to Asmara, when we look at the fact that relatives can call each other, people can telephone each other as well across the two countries. There's the possibility of Ethiopia using Eritrea's port because it's landlocked, right, for business. So these are very tangible things, right? Don't we have to look at it and say, well, you have to start somewhere. These are happening. They're happening right now.
Absolutely.
Let's give it a go.
Yes, yes. We have to embrace it with open arms. This is fantastic. This was unexpected. But we also have to remember that, as I said, the most deadly war in African history occurred in a context of much more economic integration and social integration and political cooperation than what we have today.
Okay.
And I think we should look to the past to try to learn from it.
Okay.
And one of the things we can learn from the past is that the relationship was based on sentiments and a lot of, assumptions. And it wasn't sufficiently institutionalized.
Right.
So I think it's important that we settle the terms of our future engagement quickly.
Okay. Daniel McConnell, are we not giving enough credit to Isaias Afwerki because it takes two to tango? Abiy Ahmed, yes, made the gesture, but initially Eritrea was quiet. Afwerki could have stayed at home, or he could have said, don't come. He could have sat down and completely rejected it or ignored it. The ball was in his court. The fact that he actually took the step to embracing this dialogue, should we be giving him credit, even though I know there are many criticisms of the man?
Yes, let me make a quick correction for a few seconds and I answer your question. I haven't written any report on behalf of the Commission of Inquiry as claimed by Chirac, and this needs to be corrected. With regard to giving credits to both governments, I would say that credit goes to both governments. In fact, this latest peace initiative was taken by the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. What I need to say is it's very good to see that both governments are engaged in this kind of constructive development. We acknowledge that, of course, with a certain degree of caution. But there are not institutions in place. There is no democratic accountability per se. In particular in Ethiopia, I mentioned it before, there is not even a duly constituted national assembly or parliament. And what do we do next? 1 month from now or 2 months from now, if this government comes back and tells us we don't really care about what's happening between us. That's what happened many years back. We don't have guarantees. It's good to acknowledge the positive developments, but at the same time, it's also important to recognize the shortcomings. Unless these shortcomings are resolved in a very responsible way, peace may not prevail between the two countries in a sustainable way. This is the point I'm trying to make.
Okay. Chirac, is that a fair point?
Of course not. I mean, you have to imagine, I'm willing to learn from the past, learn from the last 20 years, and then move on towards peace and towards prosperity, development, and regional peace as well, not just Eritrean, but the whole region. You have Yemen, you have Sudan, you have Somalia, you have Djibouti, a lot of troubled region that we live. So we need to look forward and we need to learn from the past. But the problem we have is Eritrea has paid quite a lot, as I said. And people like Daniel Mokonnen and his likes, they have been an extension of the past ruling party when they were attacking Eritrea. So, I mean, I would expect him and his likes to say sorry because they have been getting it wrong of what's been happening. Their analysis, their actions have been completely wrong and unacceptable. Now, the President Isaias and Prime Minister Abiy have done something like the whole world is actually thanking them, encouraging them, and they're being put as an example. And of course, we have to learn from the past, but what we have witnessed just over the last 2 weeks is quite an encouraging thing. Eritrea has been saying that we need to work with Ethiopia since our independence, because our region is a very, very important region. It's strategically located. The whole or the majority of the world economy passes through in front of our doorsteps, so we can do quite a lot if Eritrea and Ethiopia work together. So that's what we've been trying. So it's very encouraging.
Okay. Daniel Mokonnen, we're running out of time. Wrap us up here. Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, my point is actually it's not me or somebody else who should really ask, who should apologize. It's the Eritrean government who should apologize first and foremost for what has been done over the past many years. We have seen this kind of responsible move from the new Prime Minister of Ethiopia. He has publicly apologized for the past mistakes of the previous governments. We haven't seen up to this moment from the Eritrean government, in particular from President Isaias Afwerki. He should follow the same steps, actually. And it's not for me, for an individual person, to ask the apology. It should really come from the Eritrean government. And I wanted to make the point clear in this regard. Only that way, with a responsible government, with accountability for the people, that we can have sustainable peace between the two countries.
Okay, well, we'll be watching very closely. We hope that peace takes root and lasts. We'll be covering the story as it unfolds. But for the moment, gentlemen, I have to thank you, Daniel Mokonnen, Goitam Gebrieluel, and Sirak Balbi. Thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers. Still to come on the program, did Germany render justice in the case of this neo-Nazi and the murder of 10 people? And did this tourist's complaint about sexual harassment in Egypt break the law? We debate why she's now serving an 8-year prison sentence. The conviction of a neo-Nazi has led to more diplomatic tension between Germany and Turkey. In the early 2000s, Beate Zschaepe belonged to a white supremacist group that killed mostly Turkish migrants. On Wednesday, a court handed down a sentence that will likely put her in prison for 15 years. So, has justice been served? According to Turkey, no. Turkey's foreign ministry says Zschaepe was part of a bigger conspiracy that involved Germany's deep state and intelligence community, claiming the real criminals remain in the dark. With more on this, here's Haider Abbasi.
Beate Zschaepe has been sentenced to life in prison. She was found guilty on all charges, including the murder of 10 people, 2 bomb attacks and 15 robberies. Zschaepe spent years as a neo-Nazi who, after her arrest, renounced her racist beliefs. Her trial was one of the longest in post-war Germany, lasting more than 5 years. It's a case that's gripped the nation, not only for the crimes committed, but by the way it was handled.
For my clients, it was important to understand why the state did not protect them. Why did the state criminalize our father? Why has the state been wiretapping them, bugging their cars, made them suspects? Here the question of institutional racism arises.
Zschaepe is the only surviving member of a neo-Nazi cell, the National Socialist Underground. Along with Uwe Mühnlos and Uwe Bernhardt, she was involved in attacks across Germany from 2000 to 2007. 8 of their victims were German Turks. The others were a Greek national and a policewoman. Despite the life sentence, many of the victims' families aren't satisfied.
Is there an end to this? There won't be an end for us. We will always carry this pain and this sorrow with us for as long as we live. We won't be able to put an end to this after such a weak opinion of the court. We won't forget this day. We would have hoped for some focus on the victims' families too, on our pain, but we came off badly in this trial.
Zschaepe insisted she wasn't involved in the crimes and didn't know about the murders until after they happened, but the judges weren't convinced. She'll be eligible for parole after 15 years. Zschaepe's lawyer says she'll appeal the life sentence. For years, the police had rejected racist motives for the murders, instead suspecting German-Turkish gangs. This frustrated the Turkish community and led to accusations of institutional racism. The neo-Nazi cell was eventually discovered in 2011 after Mundlos and Bernhardt tried to rob a bank. They were followed by police, who found them dead in a caravan. Police believed they'd killed themselves. A few days later, Zschaepe turned herself in. News of her arrest shocked people in Germany. Many questioned how a neo-Nazi group could operate for years without the police knowing. Suspicion of the state only increased. It became clear during the trial that the NSU had come into contact with some government-paid informants, and one employee of Germany's intelligence agency admitted to destroying files on those informants after the existence of the group became public.
I don't understand why in a country like Germany files are destroyed and no one is held accountable. I don't understand why constitutional documents are not issued when one promises enlightenment. I'm disappointed.
So questions remain. How and why did the cell choose its victims? Was Germany's government aware of the group before Zschaepe's arrest? And could she have received a tougher sentence? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Well, with more on this, let's cross to journalist Christoph Lemmer, who's been covering the trial. He joins us now from the German town of Bruckmühl, just outside of Munich. And in London, we have Jacob Gould. He's a project associate at ISD Global, a counter-extremism organization. Gentlemen, looking forward to talking to both of you about this. So let me start with you, Christoph. Beate Zschaepe, found guilty, convicted. Has it been justice for the victims and their relatives?
Depends on whom you are asking. The defendants say no. The state attorney says yes. And most of the victims' families also don't say no for different reasons.
And Christoph, the fact that German police initially were insistent that this was the work of rival Turkish gangs, how damaging has it been to not only the legal process and the authorities, but the entire sort of culture wars when it comes to the question of crime and immigration?
It plays a role, of course, and it is a factor to escalate the discussion that we currently have in Germany, and this even more if I'm looking for what the NSU trial really open up from this case. There's a lot of evidence that has not been opened yet and maybe will not.
Right.
There are a lot of questions that have not been answered within the trial. One of the very easy questions, for example, is why stop the series of murder in the year of 2006, although these three people, Uwe Bernhardt, Uwe Mundlos and Beate Zschaepe, has been living together until 4th of November 2011.
Right, yeah, and the two guys who actually did the killing, yeah, those guys are dead, and you know there was that suicide, right? So it's really fascinating that she was the one sort of remaining person left, and then there were others as well. Jacob, let me ask you about that. What this says about Germany today, given that one of them, Andre E., was released because the judge determined that he'd already spent the time during the trial in prison. And when he was released, there were some neo-Nazis in court, and they were cheering. What does that tell you?
It tells you that Andre Emminger is now a hero in the neo-Nazi scene in Germany. He is actually seen by quite a few of the observers of the court trial as one of the closest associates of Uwe Bernhardt and Uwe Mundlos. And he is in fact the first person whom Beate Zschaepe called right after she realized that their trio had been uncovered in November of 2011. So he's seen by quite a few people as very close to the group, but his strategy throughout the process was to remain silent and to trust that the evidence gathered against him could not lead to a conviction of him as actually assisting in the murders himself, but merely as knowing about the murders and aiding and abetting a terror organization.
Right.
And yes, he will go back to jail if the conviction stands. But yes, his relatively mild conviction was greeted with chants from the neo-Nazis present at the trial.
Christoph, you want to add to that?
I don't believe that Andre Emminger will go to prison simply because he has been in prison now for altogether 1 year and 6 or 7 months, which is about more than one half of what he got. His sentence was 2 years and 6 months. I don't believe that they will put him in prison again. And to add something more, the convictions for the 4 supporters that have been in the trial is relatively mild compared even to what Beate Zschaepe got. Beate Zschaepe is now held or locked away for the rest of her life, probably. All the others will come out with relatively mild sentences. As well, the deliverer of the most important gun, Ralph Wohleben, he was sentenced to 10 years. Now he has been in prison since 6.5 years almost. And so I believe that in, let's say, a couple of months, he will be free as well.
Christoph, let me ask you about Beate Zschaepe herself. Wolfgang here, her lawyer, spoke with us. He didn't want to appear on the program and speak in English. He speaks English, but he didn't want to speak in English, and he just gave us a short statement, and he said they're going to appeal. They feel this was unjust. Yes. Let me ask you, what are her chances of getting maybe a lighter sentence if she appeals?
They are not so bad, because a lot of evidence is missing and was missing to this trial. You have to understand that Beate Zschaepe has not been at the crime scenes. She was not. There's no evidence and no proof how exactly and detailed she managed to be part of each of these crimes: the murders, the bombings, and the robbings. And in each and every single case that has to be proven against the federal court, the BGH, it is called in Karlsruhe, and they will check this this trial that was given yesterday.
Right.
And it was. Yeah.
Let me bring in Jacob here, because it brings up an interesting point. There's a lot of stuff missing, and it's missing because domestic intelligence agencies actually destroyed it, right? And they don't want to reveal the names of undercover agents within the neo-Nazi community. So we put that together. She might get let off, or she might get a lesser sentence, right? Because files are missing and domestic intelligence destroyed it. These are 8 Germans of Turkish descent who were killed, and a Greek and a policewoman. Would you then understand, Jacob, why, for example, the Turkish Foreign Ministry is so upset? Because they feel there is an element of a cover-up here.
Oh, absolutely. And I understand it even more in the case of the community in Germany that is of Turkish origin. It throws a very, very dangerous light on the German domestic intelligence services. And I think the trust relationship in between the Turkish community in Germany and the security intelligence services has been severely damaged. And quite a lot of observers of the process, quite a lot of social scientists who've very closely been following this process are demanding further answers, are demanding that the situation gets cleared up to restore the trust that has been lost.
Christoph, has Germany been in denial, or rather has it underestimated the neo-Nazi threat, and it has been evidenced in this trial?
Germany and the German society is very good in, well, lighting candles and being very strong with symbols whenever neo-Nazi crimes happen. This works very well. This is the soft part of it, showing I myself as a German do something good and show something good. The other side is the hard work that the police has to do, and maybe as well secret services if feasible. But what they do is driven by interests that I really don't understand. And to give you the best example of all that, Chancellor Angela Merkel is always on the side of those who say, we want to welcome refugees, for example. We want to be a good and a beloved country, a nation within the others. But on the other hand, she was the one to promise to uncover all the crimes of the NSU. But at the same time, let's say 2 or 3 days later, files were deleted in an office that belongs to her chancellor office. And that doesn't fit together.
Zschaepe, given that groups such as, political parties such as the AfD are in parliament, a lot of them, I mean, they would say, oh, we had neo-Nazi links in the past, but we've sort of, broken away from those shackles, and if anybody shows Nazi inclinations, we kick them out of the party. We've had some of their members on the show as well in the past. Sometimes a lot of what they do seems to be a form of neo-Nazism dressed up as something else. Given that we saw that support in Parliament for Andre, given that the AfD is in Parliament, are you concerned, given that you're involved in counter-extremism, that this kind of white supremacist neo-Nazi extremism is on the rise?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the great concerns we have here at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. There is a resurgence of white nationalism that, as you mentioned, does not quite use the same symbolism as the Nazi symbolism anymore, but that uses dog whistles to hint very similar ideas. There's a rise of, for example, the identitarian movement in Germany that sort of overtly tries to distance itself from the neo-Nazi connection of some of its leading members, but that nevertheless is pushing quite a dangerous agenda. And that has some links with the AfD. The AfD, even though it has an official statement that it will not cooperate with the identitarian movement, there is a lot of personal interaction, among other places in Thuringia, where the NSU was formed.
Christoph, very finally from you, because I think you disagree.
I do. I give you an example of what the German state and the government is doing and what it is worth when you look at it closer. In the year of 1992, we had a couple of bombings and fires that have been set against asylum homes in Germany. The biggest case of that was in Rostock. The reaction on that, the former family minister of the Federal Republic of Germany, which was Angela Merkel, set up a program, funding it with altogether 80 million Deutschmarks at this time, to prevent young people from violence and right-wing political violence. This money was spent in a couple of cities in eastern Germany, and one of these cities was Jena in Thuringia. And one of the places where it was spent was the Winzer Club. And exactly at this place, Beate Zschaepe, Uwe Mundlos, and Uwe Böhnhardt have met. And it was exactly the time when they got more political and more radical and found up their ideology and their way to go. So this program did not work, at least not work for these three people. To my understanding, they spent quite a lot of money for quite a lot of things, but no one really evaluates what this money does. It has become a business that has set up in an own kind of reality. Right. That has not to do very much with the reality at the streets.
Okay, and I appreciate the examples that you gave us. Gentlemen, it's been really fascinating to get a deeper understanding of the situation in Germany right now. Christoph Lemmer and Zschaepe Gull, I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers.
Welcome.
Now the law calls sexual harassment a crime, and there's a punishment for it. This makes a difference. Also, all the movements after 2011 in general, even the non-political ones, have helped, and many girls are now starting to report it. There are cases that have been won.
While Egypt has laws to protect women from sexual harassment, the government is still throwing the accusers in prison. Egypt sentenced the Lebanese tourist to 8 years. Prosecutors say in Mona el-Mazbouh's online description about being harassed, she insulted Egyptians and the presidency. Meanwhile, jailed activist Amal Fathi has seen her detention extended for a 5th time without trial for speaking out against sexual harassment, a decision condemned by Amnesty International. Well, joining me now from London is Mustafa Ragab. He's the director of Egyptian House London, a centre for the Egyptian community. And in Tunis, we have Ahmed Izzat. He's a researcher at Amnesty International. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Mustafa Ragab, let me start with you. Mona el-Mazbouh, an 8-year sentence for insulting the country. Okay, she went on a bit of a tirade on social media, but that's really harsh, isn't it?
Well, how do you judge that? You are looking at people who use the freedom of expression, freedom of speech to insult people, to accuse people of things. So really, if you are visiting a country and you choose to do that, then you should face the consequences.
Haven't you been,
8 years,
but
4
certainly,
years,
sir,
6 years,
haven't you, when you've traveled, haven't you been onto TripAdvisor, for example? Tourists like to moan. They say terrible things all the time. They insult the country. They say, my bathroom didn't work. These people are dirty. Whatever it is, this is what people do. They moan when they're on holiday. Why does a woman have to go to jail for 8 years for it?
No excuse whatsoever. Let me tell you something. When I was at uni, I was going to visit Germany. And before I go, I was giving an instruction what to say and what not to say and what to do and what not to do. And the reason for all this is not to insult the German people. And people shouldn't be giving that now, because people should know if they are anywhere, even if their own country, they're not allowed to. Let me give you an example. When the Prophet Muhammad was insulted in somewhere, and the Muslim community in the UK came out in a demonstration and had all these placards saying, "Your 9/11 is coming," and insulting the British people, a lot of those people were arrested and sent to prison. How long for? Different periods.
Okay, but
and
this is
when
very
the
different,
right wing,
I mean,
when the right wing, just let me tell you,
okay.
and when the right wing was trying to organize another demonstration against this, and they were going to wear T-shirts insulting badly the Muslim community.
Yeah,
with our work with the police, we managed to stop this.
Okay, fair enough. But you're comparing her to Al-Muhajirun and Omar Bakri and all these guys, right? What we're saying is that here's a woman who had a bad experience.
No, I'm not comparing.
Okay, but fair enough. She had a bad experience, which included very solid claims and very heavy claims of sexual harassment, right? So shouldn't we be looking at sexual harassment rather than blaming her and prosecuting her for speaking out against it, no matter how uncouth she might have been?
What I'm going to say to you there, two wrongs don't make a right. If she's got rights because she was sexually harassed, then that is an issue, that is a case she can go with. But you don't go and take the law into your hands and insult the whole nation.
Okay.
This is what I'm saying.
And the reason I wanted to...
Freedom of speech should stop. Let me tell you this very clearly in this program. Freedom of speech and expression should stop at the word respect.
Okay, so
and
Ahmed
if we do that, then we will have no problem.
Okay, so Ahmed Izzat, I wanted to bring you in a little bit later on, and I wanted to get a clear idea of where Mustafa Ragab's coming from and the justification. Now I can bring you in. Does any of that convince you, Ahmed?
Let's resume that the language Mrs. Mona used in her video wasn't appropriate. But at the end of the day, when it comes to international standards and international legal standards, I mean, the language she used, if it is inappropriate, it shouldn't lead anyone to imprisonment. Given that at the end of the day, she didn't incite to violence, she didn't discriminate or call for the discrimination against any part of the society. And this is a question we should ask ourselves.
Okay, but Ahmed, can I put it to you this way, right? Even though you or I or Amnesty International, whoever might disagree with it, right? There's a law in Egypt. Defaming and insulting the Egyptian people is a crime. And so when I look at her words, she called Egyptian people the dirtiest people, son of a bitch country, full of pimps and beggars. You deserve what Sisi's doing to you. I hope God sends you someone more oppressive than Sisi. That in mind, I disagree with throwing someone in jail with that, and you do as well, and Amnesty does. Do you accept that maybe within Egyptian law, they might have had a case, Ahmed?
No, actually, there is a big problem in the Egyptian law that there are many provisions that are vaguely defined. For example, the insulting someone or insulting an institution, because this happens every way. Freedom of expression should be given to those, especially say controversial opinions. When it comes to normal opinions or the opinions we are familiar with, there is no problem. But the problem starts when it comes to controversial opinions. Controversial opinions deserve more protection when it comes to freedom of expression. That's a problem. And as you mentioned, we should make a balance between the root cause that led to this speech, which is sexual harassment, which has been ignored at all completely in this incident, and the consequences this situation led us to. For example, when it comes, we should ask ourselves whether this speech said by Mrs. Mona led to, for example, social unrest in Egypt. This didn't happen. So at the end of the day, she is not a public figure.
Okay, so let me bring in Mustafa Ragab here, because the point of sexual harassment is made again, and it's not just with regards Muna al-Mazbouh. We have Egyptian activist Amal Fathi detained, and her detention extended as well. Similar story. She says, I was sexually harassed. She's angry. She puts something on social media. She ends up in jail. Don't you think that even though you might agree with the law and the policy that you shouldn't be insulting the Egyptian state institutions, the president, whoever, whatever, but sexual harassment needs to be looked into? This isn't a good look for the country if women are getting sexually harassed left, right, and center.
Let me tell you something. The harassment is all over the world.
I know, but
if you're going to expose it in a certain country,
certainly we're doing this about Egypt.
We're talking about Egypt, but this is but this is an issue all over the world, and it should be addressed. It should be ignored. But you cannot go for an excuse because you were sexually harassed. I cannot repeat the words that you said, that the lady said. It's so filthy. And if you choose to come out and with these words, and every country is allowed, as entitled, to make their own law. So if there is some countries are soft about this, some countries are very hard about this, every country should be allowed to make their own law. And this is made to teach people a lesson, to say to people, stop there, that something should never happen. So if we're going to say international law or all over the world, it doesn't apply to everybody. Everybody should be allowed to make their own law. And Egypt has not overreacted in this. Egypt have stepped in to say, we're not allowing anybody to say the filthy words against anybody in Egypt. This is simple. And if you're going anywhere in the world, you should learn what to say and what not to say. If I'm going to Tunisia, where my friend is, so I should know what to say and what not to say, and have full respect for the Tunisian people, regardless what happened to me in Tunis. Because if someone in Tunis insulted me or accused me, that is not Tunis, that is a person, that is someone. So I don't go and accuse or insult the whole country because someone have done something wrong to me. Do you agree with me there or not?
Mr. Ragab, she posted a second video apologizing. Why wasn't her apology enough for you?
Too late. You don't go and kill someone and say, I'm sorry. You don't go and insult someone and say, I'm sorry.
She didn't kill anybody, and that's the point.
You're entitled to apologize, but it's up to me to accept your apology or not.
But again,
you don't say, well, I apologized.
Okay, but again,
I haven't accepted your apology.
But you gave some analogies, right? And I don't want to take your analogies too literally and too seriously. But earlier you said, you know, it's just like those guys who said, your 9/11 is coming, or whatever it is. You were comparing her to extremists, al-Muhajirun, and Umar Bakri and that lot, and now you're saying you don't kill someone and then apologize afterwards. She didn't kill anybody. She said some stuff while angry on holiday. Come on. You're bigger than that.
She is insulted. She insulted the whole nation, and under no circumstances I will accept any insult with any apology. You have insulted the country, you have insulted the Egyptian woman, you have insulted the whole nation. Someone has done something wrong with you, you don't go and insult the whole British people. You can't do that, you just can't do it. And this is a message for people to learn.
But it's a message, it's not very good for your tourism industry, which you're trying to boost. Sisi's trying to boost tourism.
No.
Come over, don't say anything bad about us or else we'll throw you in jail. Don't insult us. Come on. How's that going to work for tourism?
No, my friend, I don't say anything bad. I say something reasonable. We're not encouraging any tourist to open his mouth with any insult to the country. He's not welcome. If he's coming to insult the people, he's not welcome. I tell you that.
Okay. Ahmed Izzat, now that we've heard a lot from Mustafa Ragab, and he's doubling down. He's pretty firm on this. Let me ask you, if you had to advise her, she's got it was a longer sentence than 8 years initially, and now it's 8. If you had to advise her legally and otherwise, what would you tell her to do? What is her legal recourse?
Yeah, before joining Amnesty, I used to be a lawyer in Egypt, and I worked in many criminal cases. And nothing in the Egyptian law, in the Egyptian penal code, say that I should be entitled to criminal trial because I insulted Egypt or Egyptian people. I should be referred to a trial or investigation if I insulted an individual, a certain individual, and this individual complained against me to the authorities, and this didn't happen because she didn't direct her insult or her speech to a specific person or a specific institution, and this is a problem. Nothing in the Egyptian law criminalizes such act, and this is the first thing. But what gives the authorities this margin to imprison people, because what they are saying is the widely defined and the ambiguous social, political, and other norms included in the Egyptian law.
I know Mustafa Ragab disagrees, but Mr. Ragab, we're out of time. We're going to get you back on the show soon, but I appreciate you both taking the time to come on to the Newsmakers, Ahmed Izzat and Mustafa Ragab. Thank you very much. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.